Okay, I've remembered how to record, and that's recorded. All right, so welcome everyone to our experienced TA panel. In today's session, we will hear about the teaching journeys and practices from 4 award and competition winning teaching assistants. And by the end of the session, it is my hope that you leave with advice, tips, and greater confidence, especially as you embark on your own teaching journeys. So I'm Dr. Ashley Sorrell. I am an instructional consultant in the Teaching and Learning Center, as well as Assistant Director of Graduate Student Professional Enhancement in the Graduate School, and I will be your facilitator today. So let's get started by having the panelists introduce themselves. So CJ, we'll just start with you. You're on my left here. If you could just state briefly your name, program, and the types of courses you teach or have taught.
Okay, awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Cassie Jane, working, call me CJ. And I'm a PhD candidate in the history department at UK. And I have taught History 108 and History 109, which is the broad survey class of the first half of American history and the second half of American history. And I've absolutely loved it. And I've taught it with different, like at least 5 or 6 professors in the history department. So I've had a variety of experience with different supervising professors. And now for this year, I am a teaching assistant for CELT, so for the Center of Enhancement of Learning and Teaching. So very excited to be here. Thank you for asking me to be here.
Great. Daria, you are to my right, so we'll go with you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daria Goncharova. I'm an international student from Russia and a PhD candidate in the English department. I typically teach either film courses, such as Introduction to Film and Great Films, or composition and communication courses in rhetoric and digital studies department. So I mostly work with like freshmen and sophomores. This semester, I'm co-teaching an introduction to film course with my chair, and I'm very excited about it.
Great. Lewis?
Hello, my name is Lewis.
Hello.
Sorry, Luis Dominguez. But then
okay, that's why I was confused. I was like, I'm not on the panel, but I was going to introduce myself.
Surprise, you're on the panel.
My apologies to me. I thought I clicked unmute. But anyway, so I have done a number of recitations. First, my name is Luis Dominguez. I am a 6th-year teaching assistant in the mathematics department. I've done a number of recitations all throughout sort of calculus and things. But among the courses that I've instructed, I've taught 111, a contemporary mathematics courses for non-majors. I've taught college algebra with co-requisite support. And I've also taught a 241 class, which is geometry for future middle school teachers.
Very nice and great.
Hello, everyone. My name is Great Mewike. I'm a PhD candidate in the Department of Chemistry, and I've taught General Chemistry 111, 113, and also both in person and as well as offline during the COVID period. So yeah, it's a privilege to be here. I'm really interested to to share my experience.
Okay. Well, wonderful. And thank you all so much for joining us. I know it's the Friday before Labor Day, so I really do appreciate the time that you have given the Graduate School and CELT to tell us about your teaching journeys and experience. So I'm actually going to start with the question that I think most graduate TAs struggle with throughout their course of being a teaching assistant, and it's this idea about the elusive balance. And for TAs, it's not just work-life balance, it's graduate student life balance. So what can you say or tell us about how you manage your time between your teaching responsibilities, your family responsibilities, and your own academic pursuits? Anyone can start if you have something, on top of mind there.
Okay, I guess I would go ahead. I'll just start. Well, I strongly believe the reason why doing a PhD, you're actually passionate about the PhD program. So I believe the very first thing that I get motivated by my passion for the PhD program itself. So I'm really driven by that. I'm really passionate about the work. And secondly, I try to reward myself and also try to schedule a very good balance. So most times I block times. I ensure I try to block times when it comes to trying to dedicate a particular task for a particular thing. I just try to block my times because as a PhD student, you really be overwhelmed with so many things, lectures, research, as well as other needs coming up. So when you block your times and you know, okay, this is exactly what I need and this is what I need to do. And regarding my academic plan, I try to reward myself as well. Rewarding myself in the sense that I try to maybe weekends when I'm done with the whole planning, I just try to, just take a break, see movies or go out and just receive the fresh air and just move away from reality a little bit and, come back later. That's basically what I do to keep myself going and stay motivated as a teaching assistant. Yeah.
I can jump in next. I agree with Gray. Absolutely. You have to never lose sight of the passion of why you're here. And I think to help you do that is see everything as interconnected. Your PhD work and your research and your teaching of undergrads is really special because you get that opportunity to share that passion with undergraduate students. And I think that some people have, some TAs have like the misconception that, oh, well, most of them are not majors in these 101 classes. So, it's maybe not as exciting, but that's where you might encourage them to want to major in your discipline. So honestly, I love it the most because especially having freshmen, you get to have that you get to be that welcoming face, not only to the university, but to the profession. So I think never lose sight of that. And similar to what we just heard, I also time myself. And I use the Pomodoro method, which is like you time yourself for 25 minutes. Oh, Daria does that too. 25, 30 minutes. Of course, you can adjust. The theory is you do 25 minutes doing a certain task and you shut everything else off. You don't look at emails. You don't look at text messages. You don't look at anything else. And as somebody who gets easily distracted and who also, if you wait to measure your productivity qualitatively with anything, we're as graduate students, we're never going to be there. So if we quantitatively devote a certain amount of time, whether you're doing a block amount of time or you're doing smaller chunks, that is a good way to set that balance, at least for me, because it is very helpful to say at the end of the day, okay, I did an hour for grading, or I did an hour writing on my dissertation. So I think timing yourself is really important. And I also think that there's a misconception that graduate students need to sacrifice everything and never have fun and close yourself off in an unlit room in the library. And it's like your life is interconnected with your outside life too, your family, your friends. So I think a perfect representation of that is I'm actually not in Lexington at the moment. I flew back to go for a wedding in Albany, New York, where I'm from. So I think it's also important to carve out being with the ones you love, whether that's virtually or physically. And of course, that might be stressful when you're teaching and you're taking classes. But for the most part, professors do understand that your personal life is important too, and you shouldn't have to miss really special things. Like in this case, it's one of my best friends from high school's wedding. So I think it's important to do what you love and also start the day off with something on a positive note. For me, it's iced coffee. So whether you are making your coffee or getting it, make sure there's at least one thing in the day that you look forward to and gets you off on a positive note. And for me, it's something small like getting coffee. So make sure you do something that makes you happy at the very start of the day instead of waiting until you finish a certain amount of work. So
Daria and Lewis, go ahead, Daria.
I love it. I'm here to second everything that CJ and Craig said. I'm not going to dwell on the passion for teaching, because I think like we all have that passion for teaching, passion for research. But I'm very happy that CJ just started like throwing out actual like concrete methods and tools to help with the work-life balance. And I have one to share as well. I swear by Todoist app. I'm going to CJ heard about it, to drop the link into the chat. It's not sponsored, but really at this point I should be their sponsor, because I feel like I bring it up all the time, and it helped me so much just because it asks you to file tasks by projects. So I have like dissertation, professional development, teaching, and non-academic there. And then it also asks you to prioritize those tasks. And it helped me so much just with like day-to-day things. It helps me track my hours. It helps me be more realistic about the things I can achieve, because as many other here, I'm a perfectionist and overachiever. So I used to feel like so bad all the time, because I felt like, oh, I can definitely do all of these things in one day. I should be able to. And then once I started using the app, I realized like, oh, realistically, I can do like 5 things, big things during the day. And that's what I now plan. And it helps me feel better about my productivity and actually be more productive. So here's that.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm gonna sort of echo some of those thoughts on it. In that, if I had to say the 2 biggest things for me have definitely been planning, which we won't mention too much more about, but like staying ahead of the ball, you know, knowing that I could grade something later, but ultimately it's not that, you know, long of a task, but it is very long if you need to do it quickly. So doing things ahead of the game is a very, very helpful thing for me. And I'm really bad at it. However, I try and do whatever I can. And in the same note, I think Todoist is a good mention as a general notion, because really, really try and use your resources. There are many of them throughout campus and throughout a lot of people. And of course, like we won't use an extensive list, but ultimately, like we're just one person, but there are like millions of people who have figured this out and done it at some point. And so there's a lot of really good information and others to help out there. And that could be in your department. It could be using specific campus resources. It could be talking to friends who are later in a program if you're not the 6th year, et cetera. And so all sorts of things like that, where, you know, you're not alone, and many people have succeeded in this before, and they probably have had a better idea than you, because we're just one person. And it can be very easy to sort of get stuck in your methods until you find out that there is things like the Pomodoro method that I have taken notes about and did not know of.
So Lewis, kind of going on what you're saying, is there a specific resource or, you know, specific advice you would give to a new TA who might be struggling to keep up with their teaching responsibilities, you know, class planning, grading? Sometimes we see moments where this does seem to kind of all fall on TAs, like around midterms, finals, you're trying to do all your other coursework as well. Is there a resource or advice you might offer in that case?
I think when things really do get especially crazy during midterm, my biggest piece of advice is that you should try and allocate your tasks by their order of importance. Things that you cannot drop, don't, but then recognize that, you know, and I will note, sleep is not something you can drop. Importantly, like many people make this mistake. And so if it's coming up on midterm, it may take time to figure out that task list of what you determine to be very important. But that is time well spent, because it helps you organize for the future. And when things are very, very busy, I'm fortunate not to be teaching a stressful class this semester, but this last semester when I was teaching college algebra, I had a lot of things going on at a number of points during the semester, and just taking 20 minutes to just be like, what do I need to do in the next week? Order them by the order that I should do them the most, and then try and address them, and keep taking in new things, maybe pinning emails, using To-Do in that time specifically when it's the most stressful, was really, really helpful to me. And reaching out to a lecturer or something who you know well, because they've also had a lot of craziness with classes, all sort of like the conjunction of the spheres of work.
Yeah. So CJ and Daria, I know in your fields, particularly with grading, you're grading a lot of writing. And that can take a very long time. And great, you're probably grading lab reports. Correct me if I'm wrong. Are there tips and advice around, balancing the grading with everything else, or how you can grade so that you don't feel like it's taking weeks upon weeks?
Yes, absolutely. And I am learning, and I just think as long as you always see yourself as a lifelong learner, I'm learning from everybody here some better tips to help myself. But I think that things that I've things that I've kind of really tried to hone down on in grading like papers, for example, is that a lot of undergrads, when they come in, they're making similar mistakes in that first piece of writing, right? Or even throughout the course of a 100-level class. So a lot of the comments that you are tweaking for these students are very similar. So if you are writing comments on your laptop or on your iPad or whatever, and you're doing it digitally, like you're writing it on there, that you can, what I call like little like cookie cutter comments that are similar that you can then customize to the student. So if there's like, for us in history, you're looking at primary sources and they are interpreting them. And a lot of them, for in one example, tend to kind of give a summary versus an analysis. So that written 2 sentences, I can copy and paste to another student and then customize, what they did well, what they didn't do well, and then how like the same phraseology of like, I'm happy to meet with you in my office hours and go over this in person to help you improve for the next one. So you can make, and you can do that in the beginning. I hand wrote. A lot of the professors I TA'd for wanted physical printed essays in, but I think you can still do the same thing. Obviously it's a little more tiring for your hand, but as long as you got that little pre-made form, you can customize it and tailor it to each student. That will speed up the process a lot. Also, I think it's important to always be transparent with your students and say, look, I'm a student too, and we're learning together. I'm not an expert, and I'm also balancing some things too, and we're learning together. So setting that off at on the onset here is, I think, helpful, so that they also see you in a more human way as well. Like, oh, okay, this is also a PhD student who's not losing sight of the challenges that a student faces, which I think is really crucial. And also, there's something else I was going to say too about the grading. And then when it comes to, in our recitations in history, is a lot of discussion. So it's called the discussion section. They have to discuss the reading. But maybe you have done a cursory reading as the TA, maybe not as in-depth as you would like. Definitely lean in on group work when that happens, because then you get the students talking to each other and they feel less on the spot in front of everybody. And if you're putting them into groups and having them discuss the main points on their own and then come back, leaning in on the group work can be really beneficial. Also, some of the things that I do, and the challenge is that, okay, what do we do when the students don't read? So it's one thing when we might, as the instructor, haven't given as an in-depth one, and we're perfectionists, as Daria said. So maybe we only read it 6 times out of 7, not the 8 times we wanted or whatever. Putting the text on the screen and projecting it, and then so we could, in theory, read smaller chunks together as a class and try to break it down like that, is another little trick that I've used to really kind of maybe lean in a little more on the class time and the analysis together. So that's something that I do. And then something else that is not necessarily related to the grading, but is basically a more physical form than what Daria has suggested. I'll have to check out that website because I haven't checked it out. I use actual real Post-it notes. So I get Post-it notes and I put each little Post-it note has one thing that I need to do. And then I literally cover my counter in the Post-it notes. And as I finish it, I get the satisfaction of ripping it up. Now, devil's advocate might say, whoa, that's a waste of Post-it notes. But no, it's not, because there's physical satisfaction in ripping that up. And I think that in a digital age, we get inundated with so much things that are abstract, and I like to have that analog, like bring it back, like, all right, handwritten thing is done. I get to rip it up. And I tell my students to do the same when they're juggling their 5 courses or whatever they may be as a full-time undergrad. So that's just some of the things that I do.
I want to jump off of that for two specific, very helpful things to me. Now, your department might not pay for it, but if it does, Gradescope is an incredibly powerful resource and really, really helpful for that sort of repetitive, similar remark to student comments. So ask your department, do we pay for Gradescope? Some do, some don't. And this way you can essentially, people can upload scans of things and you can like highlight sections. It'll save your comments. You can make a grading scheme. And I have graded like swaths of exams in a fraction of the time it took because it's very simple to just be like, well, I don't have to write out on the exam. I can just scan it and then be like, okay, they miss a point here because of this. They miss a point here because of this. And then I press a couple keys on my keyboard to remark the right things. I add a couple comments, highlight, very, very quick. Okay, but now that's paid software, so not available to everyone. Let's talk about another option. If you're on Windows, this is a very simple one. If you're on Mac, there's a way to do this, but I'm not as familiar with Mac. There's a thing called copy history on Windows. Copy and paste, very, very helpful, but every now and then you have like 4 things you want to keep regularly moving around. So there's a way to ask Windows to save your copy history. And you can copy and paste anything from the last like 50 copies you've done. And you can also pin copies so that if you need something regularly every couple days, you can just go get it back. So look into Windows copy history. I'll put it in the chat. And Mac has a way of doing this as well, but again, I'm not as familiar. If you're on Linux, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I didn't know people are still on Linux, but thank you, Louis. Those are great practical tips. Now I think there's general agreement. There might be some outliers that grading can be the worst part of the job. And so I want to turn to some of the more rewarding parts. And great, I'm hoping maybe you could speak to or tell us about your approach to teaching in general, specifically thinking about what type of classroom environment you think is conducive to student learning and what strategies you use to create that environment.
Oh yeah. So one thing I try to do, I just try to help the students trust me. As a TA, you just need to give them that bit of confidence that okay, yeah, you're the TA, you know to a very good extent some of our problems and some of the things we really need to understand in this course. So first of all, I try to help them trust me. And how do I do that? I try to come prepared to class. I think that's really one thing you just don't have to ignore as a TA. Try as much as you can to come prepared to class. No matter the settings, no matter if it's maybe a discussion section or maybe you're trying to organize a lab, an experiment or something similar, just come prepared. Have a very good understanding of what the topics and what you need to cover, the aspects of the problem that you need to solve in the classroom or in the lab or things like that. So that's something that really would help the student, have confidence in you and somehow trust you as a TA. And secondly, I also believe in keeping a very good a happy appearance and a very friendly appearance as well as a TA. That helps a lot because most times the students are really scared to approach you or tell you their challenge. If you don't let them know that, oh, I'm actually a very friendly person you can always open up to or talk to. The way I do this most times, the very first email I send to them, like to introduce them to the class, what I do, I send the email and I tell them, hi, respond to this email, sending a picture of your pet. And most of them sent their cats, their dog, and I was like, yeah, that's good. And it helped the following class. The next class, I already know the names of their pets. And I'm like, hey, how is Sunny? How is, it helps a lot. It gives the student a very good, it creates a very good atmosphere and helps the student understand, okay, this is a very friendly TA I need to, share my challenge with or my academic problems with. That helps a lot.
I love that. And Daria, you were actually our most recent winner of Grad Teach Live that is involved in talking about your approach to teaching. So I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you create this learning environment in your classroom.
Of course. Well, first of all, I will say that pet pictures is absolute must. Yes, do that too. whenever you have an opportunity to solicit students' pet pictures, do that. But in my classroom, I really tried to build an environment of communication, open and effective communication, and collaboration. And it means a few things for me. Of course, we all heard about the beauties and values of group work. We know that it can expose students to new perspectives. It can help make grading easier for us when there are group projects involved, but also group projects come with a lot of challenges. So I really tried to make time both in my communication courses and in my film courses for self-reflection and reflection on our own like communication practices, our own interests, and then group reflection on these communication practices as well. I like to put students in multiple formal and informal groups throughout the semester. So it's something as easy as incorporating like group discussions into your classroom. Yeah, so when you ask big questions, instead of posing it to the whole class, breaking them into smaller groups. And I like to mix them up so they're not just talking to their neighbors, but they actually like stand up and go around the room. And you can do it simply by asking them like to count off, like into groups, or you can make it fun and ask them like pick the favorite color and group them by their favorite color. They like that. I also like to use the technology to help me with boosting the communication and participation in the classroom, because oftentimes, especially when you teach like freshmen in bigger classes, they just feel intimidated to like raise the hand and answer the question, even if they know the answer. So there is a great tool called Mentimeter. Okay, CJ heard about it. It can help you visualize their responses in a very effective way. It's very easy and intuitive for them to use and for you as well. You can create questions and then they will get on their phones or their laptops, type the name's website, the number. And you can do like free polls. I like to use it for word clouds. It's great. Like just today I used it in the class and I asked them like, what are the main motives of the Wizard of Oz? And we got this beautiful word cloud with things like friendship and home. And then I could ask them to elaborate on those things. And another thing that I think is crucial, especially for like first year classrooms, for freshman classrooms, is like building in some safety net into your syllabus, because we do ask a lot from our students who are new to college life. They're trying to learn to balance all those things that we ourselves struggle to balance as like 6-year PhD students, life, work, research studies. So building in some safety nets, I think, is crucial. For me, it means that I allow them to revise grades below B on some of like major essays, not the final projects, but the major essays. Go for it. And it also teaches them to see writing as a continual process and actually read my feedback and learn from it and apply it. So that's some of the things that I really lean on.
I love that. And Lewis, I'm really interested to hear from you as a math teaching assistant. And maybe this is just my experience, but math can cause a lot of anxiety in students. And Daria was talking about building in safety nets. I'm wondering if you could tell us about what your approach is to your math sections.
Yeah, so I think I have two sort of big comments regarding this. and they're on opposite sides of the spectrum about sort of ways to handle this. The first one is that perhaps maybe in a like humorous sense, when we were starting out our first year of graduate school, we were sort of told to tell the students as a joke, like, in some sense, you know, it's me and you, like I'm leading the recitation and I'm trying to help you guys out. And we're like against the scary professor who we want you to get help from when you're really confused, but like we're meant to be more personable and we're sort of closer to you when we see you more often, right? And of course, like this can create its own issues, but like it's not serious. But then when you go on and you're teaching your own courses, I try and maybe create an atmosphere of like, okay, well, it's you and me, and we're up against the material. Like, it's there. We both need to figure out both how I'm going to communicate it to you and how you're going to hear that from me. And so one of the ways is I try and communicate to students that like, it's not necessarily my greatest concern if you don't understand the first something or something the first time or even the second time. You know, it's that you keep the energy to continue thinking about the material. It's that you approach it with sort of a good tone. We talk a lot in our syllabi and in our course policies and a number of other things about, you know, trying to avoid down talk and using self-evaluation strategies, because often, you know, you might be trying to do an assignment at a time that you're actually not emotionally or mentally available to do so. So of course you're just going to get more frustrated, and it's just going to make you struggle with the material more at a later time. And so we sometimes talk in our courses about, you know, setting aside time to do homework, not just because it's good to do it earlier and, you know, so that you have more time to do it later, but also so that you can be in a headspace for it. And I find in mathematics that's especially relevant, because it's very, very easy to get lost and confused. But if you're sort of, maybe if you're in, we have multiple places like the study and the Math Scholar. If you're in a place where you can ask people questions, or if you're in a place where you can sort of be stressed about it in a positive way, that's a lot better than how many people have done 11:30 p.m. the day of, like, oh man, I have no idea what's going on. Oh well. And on the opposite, complete opposite side of the spectrum, there's been a couple of courses that I've had the opportunity to do with non-standard grading styles, such alternative grading methods, such as specifications-based and standards-based. And the sort of crown jewel of this is the 109 college algebra course coordinated by Chloe Urbanski-Rosniak last semester. They would take there was no exams. They would take a number of small quizzes up to 5 times throughout the semester on a series of subjects relevant to the course. And the idea was you get 5 shots at this, and we're going to space it out over the semester, and it'll be a little bit different every time. But, you know, our goal is not that you understand this in the first week, not in the first month, not even in the first half of the semester, because we had people who, by all analyses, were failing up until a month before finals. And if they figured it out by the end, it was okay, because ultimately we just want them to continue on through the course knowing what's going on. We're not concerned with the pace at which they do so. So alternative grading methods are a really big thing in mathematics, especially because we really do understand that math anxiety is a real problem. And the concept of I'm not good at math is like very widespread concern for a number of people. And often I tell people like, well, you know, you don't have to be what you perceive as good at math. You just have to try and keep at it and take it on like you would any subject. You know, your essay might require like 6 revisions, and it might take you 6 tries to do this problem. But what we want to do is we want to hone the edge until you get to that point.
That's great. So CJ, let me turn to you and ask, you know, as someone who TA'd in history myself, you know, one challenge was, you know, getting students engaged in the field of history, but also the way they encounter the field of history in higher ed is often different than what they encountered in high school as far as memorization versus analysis. And this can lead to some students struggling more so with the concepts. But also with some of the themes we teach, they can be controversial or emotional in some way. So what do you do to identify and support students who may be struggling either academically or emotionally in your class?
Well, I think that because that is a really important challenge, especially when you're teaching hard histories. I teach this American Civil War and Reconstruction and slavery in the 19th century. So those are really big topics that are so important that students feel empowered to talk about in the classroom. But before you do that, I want to bring it back to setting the right tone for the class from the beginning. And something I love the pet idea. That is great. Great. I love that. Like I haven't included that, but my thing, and I know I get joked around with at the history department because they call me extra, but I think it's good. I make cookies for my students every first class. I make homemade cookies and decorate it to say UK because a lot of them are freshmen, and I love having freshmen because of because everybody's like, oh, freshmen. It's their first time in college. You went through their first class. Like, call me sentimental, but to be a part of their college memory. And I think hopefully you could still hear me okay, because it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Not but I think it's so crucial to set that tone from the beginning that you are down to earth, that you are welcoming, and that you are always making them feel like they can come to you and ask questions, and that you're real. Because I think that in order to get to that deeper, really important and sensitive topics, that you have to set the right tone from the beginning. And some of that even leans in, and I keep saying lean in, but it's important, that you never lose, I said this before, but you never lose sight of the student you are yourself, because we can tell them that, study weeks ahead for that final, and, be proactive and be prepared. But in reality, I mean, I can talk from experience. I was also studying the night before. So also, like, don't make it fun for them as much as possible. Like, one of the things I did is I held a exam review session the night before the exam in the library Starbucks at Willie T. So that you're going closer to their environment. Most of them are in dorms that are near the library. You're making it social. You're making them a college experience, not just getting a grade to get a degree to go to work. There is a whole very well-rounded experience that college is, and you're an important part of that. So I put, having office hours in the library Starbucks, the review sessions in the library Starbucks. I even did something to get them really pumped right before the exam, because they walk into an exam so tense, ready to go, that I held a review session the hour before the exam, and it was really early in the morning because the final exams are like 8 o'clock, 7, not 7, but like 8 o'clock in the morning, which is very early for undergrads, maybe for undergraduate students too. And I brought a little waffle maker and made waffles as we were talking about the history topics. So again, I'm a little extra, but I think that doing those fun things is important to help make that class a special memory. But they're learning. To go back to the sensitive material, is that I think it's important, once you're setting that tone, that you have them think, how is history, so being history my main discipline, like, how is it talked about in everyday life? And talk about a really great time to talk about the American Civil War, when you have monument debates and you have people talking about it in the national conversation to understand problems we face today in this country and in the world. And I think that also bringing it down to the lowest common denominator being, what can we all appreciate? Well, we're all in Lexington together. Doesn't matter where you're from. We're all in this class. We're all in Lexington. Let's talk about the local history and then connect it to the national trends that we're talking about. How are Confederate monuments, for example, being talked about in Lexington? What was the history of slavery in Lexington? And have them talk about it, leading with the primary sources themselves. The voices of the individual historical actors are the best way, because if you have the best way to start the conversation is, let's focus on what we all know, the primary source in front of us, and the words of the historical actor themselves speaking for themselves, that and they were very vocal about what they thought. So I always lead with the primary sources and have them think about the connections to current day, especially in the local area, because regardless of where you are from in the country or the world, we're all in Lexington, so we can all have that shared experience together.
Yeah. Daria or Gray, do you have maybe an example of when you assisted a struggling student that you could or want to share, and kind of how you approach that situation?
I could definitely do that because working primarily with freshman students, once you get close to midterms, some students begin to disappear. And I think it's easy to get sometimes even like frustrated as an instructor, right? Because you're like, well, I'm here to help you succeed. If only you came, if only you showed up, if only you reached out. But we also know that it's so hard to reach out when you're struggling. So I definitely start like emailing students and following up once they miss more than 2 like classes in a row and I haven't heard from them. And I always start from like the place of help. I always assume that they're not there partying, like something is going on. So I always just do my best to communicate that via email, and lead with like something like, hey, I noticed that you haven't been in class lately. How you doing? And then just that human question can start a human conversation. So instead of emailing and being like, oh, you missed 2-3 classes, now your participation grade will begin to suffer. We can get to that later. Like first, I want to figure out what's going on in your life and how I can help you. And oftentimes students will respond with, I'm struggling. Or oftentimes they will say even things like, honestly, there is like nothing major, but I feel bad. Like I feel trouble getting out of bed. I feel depressed, and they will feel ashamed of it, but they will still communicate it to you. And if they do, when they do, I just like jump on it, and I'm honest with them, and I sympathize with them, and I also do my best to connect them to the resources that we have here on campus. Counseling center, I swear by it. There is community of concern that I think got renamed a few times. I still refer to this as a community of concerns, but that's a great resource that can help connect students to like other resources, right? Because just the whole college experience is so overwhelming, and we mentioned it several times here that we have those resources on campus that can help us, but it takes so much time to actually learn about their existence, to learn how to use them. And so for students who are freshmen, that can feel so overwhelming. So acting as that point of connection for them, that's something that I take on, and I volunteer to walk them to some of these resources. Like, hey, like if you feel comfortable, would you like me to show you where it is, just like after class, so that you know? And just connecting them to the support system, I think, is so important, and seeing them like first and foremost as human beings, and being also like honest to them about your struggles as well. No, you don't have to like cry on their shoulder and go into the detail about how bad like your weekend was, but just admitting that like I also had moments of struggle, like, hey, I hear you, I know how hard it is. I always emphasize to them on the first day of class that I'm a student as well, and I know what they're going through, and we're here to figure it out together, truly.
Yeah, let me just resonate a little bit on that. I really agree with Daria. Most times the students, when you let them know this is actually not a personal thing, the tension, the pressure, and the fear is a general thing. I mean, we all get scared when we're posed with challenges or maybe exams or interviews or things like that. So when you give them that confidence that, oh, you're not going through this alone. I mean, it's a general thing. And most students here are actually scared, even though they don't show it that they are scared. You're not the only one. Most students are also scared. And one thing I observe is the tension is really built up when we have when it's midterm or when it's exam. You see the students are always tensed and they're always very slow to go to classes and things like that, because they're probably they need that confidence to actually face the exam or the test they have before them. So what I do most times, I try to let them know I'm always available during office hours. I just try to let them know that the office hours is actually a very good time where we can have one-on-one opportunity to address questions and solve problems together, academic problems together. So I try to stay, even if it's extra, maybe 10-20 minutes after my office hours, to just encourage and help these students and let them see that, oh, you're actually interested in helping them, so that they can actually develop interest and have some form of dedication towards their coursework. So I try to just, once it's midterm, once it's exam, I just try to give myself the motivation to give extra time to the students and to just have more time for them. That's what I do most times.
Yeah, great. I am going to pause here to see if there are any questions from folks here, or even if you all have any questions for each other based on what you've heard.
I'll throw in a question.
Okay, Morris.
Self-reflect a little bit, because earlier CJ mentioned that TAing is a special experience. And so I'm wondering what, in your experience, what has being a TA taught you about your humanity? That's one way you can approach this question. The other way is, what has TAing taught you about yourself as a scholar? So one or the other of those, I'd love to hear your response.
I love those questions. And I wish we got asked that more too, because it is, I think that, like, when I started at UK and some of the other graduate students are, they have a lot of passion for where they went to undergrad, and understandably so. I went to Siena College. I love it. But they're like, I don't want to buy a shirt from UK. I don't want to, but it's like, UK believed in you and invested in you, and they are rooting you on. And as stressful as graduate school is, buy that shirt. Have the UK pride. Normally I'm wearing my UK shirt. I don't have it on at the moment, but I have my sweatshirt. Lewis has got his on. You have to be invested and excited. Your students are there. They're going to basketball games. They're going to football games, probably a little more than they're studying. You gotta emphasize the balance. But that's part of experience, and we should be doing those things too. So having the pride for the school that you're at and you're getting your degree from and teaching is really important for that. And I think it's taught me that and as a reminder that life is happening while they're going to school. Just for yourself, you have outside things that are stressing you out, that are on your mind. That's the same for them. So many students have, and I've honored that they felt comfortable coming to me section, not to scare them, but simply to be like, I want to make sure you're okay, to make sure, and I love that you do the same thing that I do. I make a little toolbox that I call it a little campus survival toolbox kit. And here's all where the resources are on campus. Here's the phone number. Here's the emails that they can go right there. And that's just not even an exhaustive list. Like, here's all your tuition offers you, which is a lot of awesome things. But so many students have opened up to me about struggles that they're dealing with personally, maybe with their family, their mental health struggles. And just to tell them and to hear from somebody who's not, like, I am the biggest fan of the counseling center, and I always pump them up. But it's also nice to hear that from somebody who's not in the counseling center and be like, it's okay. College is hard. And what you're doing is really awesome. You're getting a college degree. We're here for you. And it is really hard. And never, I think that a lot of TAs and sometimes professors kind of assume the worst of students at times. And you have to come in with a different perspective. Assume the best of them, that, you want to point them in the right direction. Even walk them if that makes them comfortable. I love that, Daria, like what you said. And that, remember that they're human beings first that are dealing with a lot of outside things. And being able to tell them that it's okay to ask for help. And of course, different reactions for different TAs and different professors. But I love when students, and I tell them I'm proud of them when they reach out and ask for an extension. I don't think they're any less for that. And honestly, I wish I had asked that more. And it's okay. Like, I can't guarantee other professors and TAs wouldn't take points off. I don't take any points off. I think that it's a valuable skill to learn that I think that taught in high school, maybe like in my high school, like, oh, you can't ask for extensions in college. Don't do it the night before. Don't do this. And it's like, life happens. You have to be able to have that, you know, to never lose sight of what you struggle with as a student too, because they're embarking on a very overwhelming journey, and a very overwhelming but special. And I do think that with graduate school, we must really like the disciplines that we're getting a PhD in, because we're spending a very good portion of our life doing it. So we should also reflect that and be examples to our undergrads of, like, you know, that what you're doing is special and it's big, but that's why we're here together to figure it out. We're all part of UK. I think that stressing that pride together is important, that I think might seem very small, but sprinkling that in, like in my first slideshow, I have a picture of in the first day in my PowerPoint, a picture of the Wildcat, you know, the UK mascot, holding a nice coffee. And like, you're sprinkling that in. That's part of their experience. That's part of our experience. So I think that, you know, it's, we got to come across as human and fun while we teach them these very important topics.
I think there's a related sort of, I guess, perhaps overly philosophical response on the you know, what has it taught us about our humanity side. And your question reminded me of one of my favorite words, which is sonder. Because of course, like, we're very busy and we have a lot of students, and you know, I've been here for 6 years doing courses, both a lot of people I've met who aren't part of the math program, and then a lot of students that I've had in one way or another. And it's absolutely wild to think that, like, these people are alive and living, which is a very strange sentence, but like, when I was going through teaching and when I was going through things, it really, keeping that in mind helped me be such a better educator. And I know that sounds like the most inhuman thing to be like, no, remember your students are alive. But like, it's a very serious comment in that, like, remembering that they have things that they're doing, and like, they might be struggling with things that they're not comfortable telling you and you'll never know about. And so keeping that open mind about each of your students is a person, and they're struggling with the material in their own way. Some of them are struggling with the rate that you're not teaching it fast enough for them, and that can be bothersome to them in its own way. But of course, we usually think about the reverse side of that, where, you know, they're not quite understanding it at a pace that is relevant, is like, works for how we're teaching it, and you got to work on that. But it's taught me that I have to be much more aware of other people's lives, because it's very easy to settle into a routine and just try and use my mental cookie cutter responses when I see what I think is a problem that I've seen a dozen times before. But like, every one of my students has a name and they have a major and they have things, and I should take that into consideration when I'm working with them.
Okay, let me just add something. UK is really at the forefront of diversity and inclusion, and there's one thing I really appreciate as a UK student, working with these diverse students from different places, international students. It has really helped me a lot, and you really be amazed when you have a group of students with different experience, different perspective about life come together to work on a particular thing, and how much progress that thing would make. So as a PhD student or as a researcher, it has really opened me to so many opportunities. Right now, when I try to do things, I have this collaborative spirit in me to try and work with people of diverse and of different perspective to, you know, make something work. And I think I learned that from being a TA here in UK. It has really helped me, like learning to work with people with different orientation and perspective about things. It has really helped me a lot. And I think that's one thing I give it up to UK for. Yeah.
Just to add quickly to, I think it was the first part of the question about like what it also taught you as an educator, or maybe that was the second one, or a researcher. I really see like critical inquiry as another cornerstone of my classroom. And I love when my students ask questions to which I don't know an answer. I freaking love it. And I'm so happy to admit to them that I don't know. I've never thought about it this way, but it's so awesome that you did. Tell me more about what made you think of this question. And now like, let's try to figure it out together as a classroom. And I think just like this desire for curiosity, which is more simple way of explaining critical inquiry, just being curious about the world and seeing the real world, the quote-unquote real world, and the space of the classroom as inherently interconnected. So regardless like of what I teach, I love to bring it back to like their experience. If I'm teaching composition communication, we are talking about social media that they're on, and how that affects the communication, their like news intake, everything. If we're talking about films, we're not just talking about classical Hollywood, we're talking about the films they've just seen and how that relates to those classical Hollywood films. We're also talking about like Oscars, and the industry and why that concerns them or doesn't concern them, and how like writers' strikes affect what they see on the screen or don't see on the screen. So just continuously like drawing those connections and staying curious about the world.
Great responses and great question, Morris. We are at time, but I do have one last question for all of you all, just to, a brief answer, 30 seconds or so. If you could go back in time and give your younger self a piece of advice about being a teaching assistant, what would it be? And great, let's start with you.
Okay, well, I would advise myself to not be afraid to ask a question or ask for help. Yeah, I think it's something most TAs try to avoid, because you try to see yourself as you should know all things, or you should know this and that. No, always ask for help when you need help. It helps a lot.
CJ?
I would tell my future self to definitely carve time to do things of what you love that's important to you, because that's also going to help you be a better educator, and to see that the beauty in being a lifelong learner, and to not see your discipline as this, blinders on, that we are all kind of metaphorically holding hands here as educators to help that student get across that stage and get that degree, that it's all related. So I think that to see the beauty in being a lifelong learner, and to balance that with doing things that you love that will help you see an even critical eye, and a better critical, more appreciative eye of what you do.
Yeah.
Carve time for yourself. Protect your mental health. We've talked a lot about being available for the students. I fully support that. I'm trying to be available for my students as much as I can. At the same time, I now have the policy where I don't check my email after 8 o'clock. I don't answer emails after 8 o'clock. Even if something happens and I get to like see it, I will schedule that email for to go out for in the morning, because I also want my students to realize that we're all human beings who have lives, and if you chose to stay up late doing this assignment, doesn't mean that your instructor is up late answering your emails.
For me, I think sort of my biggest metaphorical advice would just be, and like the thing I would tell myself is, build my tower wider and with a stronger foundation before I worry about adding more floors. There's so many things that I have really, really good, but very shaky knowledge of, which is a crazy, like, like impossible, it seems. Yet somehow it could be very easily tipped over, but I can tell you a lot about it. But if I could go back, I would say, just do it. Just read all you can about a lot of these things. You don't need to know everything. You just need to be able to understand the basics so that you can approach it later when you want to get higher.
Great. Thank you all so much. And thank you for your time to speak with us today about your experiences and the amazing teaching you're doing in the classroom. So thank you.
Thank you guys. This
you
was
for
so much fun.
organizing
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you so much for the
Labor Day.
opportunity. And it was
Yes.
Cool.
a good time to answer the questions and sort of